Electric, send him to the principal's office and have him expelled!
What the hell happened to the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Once they were one of the most celebrated franchises in modern Hollywood with several critical and financial successes. But now, well, they gave us Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. I'll admit, I enjoyed the previous two Ant-Man movies, and I do agree with Kevin Feige that he's a very underestimated character, seeing as how he played a major role in stopping Thanos in Endgame. But why did they take this character, who's usually more lighthearted and fun, and thrust him into something that's playing a pivotal role in the future of the MCU? And also, why make said movie a complete dumpster fire? Like, there's bad writing, and then there's this. Quantumania's script is so bafflingly stupid and confusing that I have no idea how it was even approved. The pacing is jank, there's a staggering amount of plot holes, the story only seems to progress by having the characters make stupid decisions, and the dialogue is an absolute joke. And the actual jokes are also really bad. Not only that, but the movie also looks like crap. There's the obvious example with MODOK, and yeah, he's pretty much my sleep paralysis demon, but the rest of the CGI in Quantumania is still really ugly. It's terribly lit, where a lot of times it's hard for me to see what's going on, the color palette looks like somebody vomited up moldy Skittles, and the chroma key effects are downright embarrassing, especially when you consider how this had the same budget as Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and that movie looks incredible. The only saving grace I can think of, other than the score being good, is that Kang does a decent job as the villain. Sure, Jonathan Majors is actually an abusive piece of shit in real life, but he does a good job in the role, and Kang himself is a solid threat, especially since we should be seeing more of him in the future depending on if they go through with recasting him. Overall, Ant-Man Quantumania is one of the lowest lows of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'll probably keep subjecting myself to this zombie of a franchise, and maybe they might turn out something good every once in a while. But overall, they're a far cry from how they were in the late 2010s. Now let's talk about another superhero movie.
We're going back in time. That's right. We're going back in time.
This year saw the death of the DC Extended Universe, a franchise that's consistently pumped out mediocre or downright terrible content. Case in point, the unofficial finale that reset everything for this universe, The Flash. Now, Barry Allen has been long overdue for a standalone feature film. I mean, he's debatably more powerful than Superman given his ability to time travel, and getting to explore his personal turmoil with losing both of his parents definitely has potential. Sadly, the way they went about doing this makes for one of the worst films under the DC brand to date. It's written in such a messy and disorganized way that any good ideas it has are thrown into the trash in favor of gaping plot holes and soulless nostalgia bait. It also makes the characters feel like blank slates. I guess Supergirl's actress seemed to be trying her best, but Michael Keaton's Batman sounds tired and hardly even does a whole lot throughout the film, the villains are underdeveloped, and Ezra Miller plays two Flashes here despite all the criminal allegations levied against them, and the second one is just insufferable. Like, Barry was annoying in Justice League to be sure, but the duplicate version of him made me want to go blind and deaf so I wouldn't have to deal with how obnoxious he is. But let me go back to something I mentioned earlier real quick, which is how The Flash uses the multiverse as a way to shove in cameos. I mean, it's bad enough that none of the animated DC properties got any attention, but there's also the fact that it has some ghoulish CGI necromancy of deceased actors. Obviously, it's repulsive how Warner Brothers was okay with desecrating the legacies of these actors for the sake of cheap nostalgia, but this brings me to another problem with The Flash. How in the hell, heaven, and everything in between did this movie have a budget of upwards of $300 million, while at the same time having CG effects that look more nightmarish than Cats? I guess the cinematography is okay, but in terms of visuals, everything else about The Flash is god-awful, and it mainly involves the joke that is the CGI. There's so many obvious uses of digital effects that it makes the action feel fake, and not in the way where I can still suspend my disbelief at what I'm watching. I mean, it looks like a lot of shortcuts were taken to have as little real in-camera stunts as possible. That and the rendering on a lot of the digital doubles is so low quality that it makes Henry Cavill's CGI chin look like something in a James Cameron movie. Even the score sucks. It's just the most generic stock action music possible with none of the themes standing out. You'd think with all the characters here that the score would at least be memorable, but it's not. I could go on, but I think you get the idea. The Flash may have narrowly avoided the bottom three, but it's still a strong contender for one of the worst superhero movies of all time. Hopefully now that the DCEU is over, the upcoming content we get can be better, because this was certainly a sour note to go out on.
If you had to choose, if you had to choose.
It's a tie.
2023 saw the release of a handful of animated films from foreign countries into American theaters. One of them was perfectly average, but two of them became two of the worst films of the year, Rally Road Racers and Inspector Sun and the Curse of the Black Widow. For the life of me, I could not figure out which one was worse, as both are awful movies in their own right, so I decided to have them tied for the number 3 spot. If there's a major criticism I can levy against them both, it's that they have some truly hideous animation. Like, how the hell did Viva Kids look at these and think they were of a high enough quality for theaters? The animation is so janky and stiff that it feels like the characters are robots. Couple that with the boring backgrounds, low quality rendering, and abysmal lip syncing, and you've got yourself some of the worst looking animation to hit the big screen since Norm of the North. As for the writing, well, don't expect it to be much better. While these movies are only around 80 minutes long, watching them felt like 80 years. There were points where I wasn't even sure I could finish them. And in the case of Rally Road Racers, that wasn't helped by how flat out basic the story was. It has every single cliche you can imagine, and it plays them very straightforward. Inspector Sun is also somewhat guilty in that regard, but Rally Road Racers is definitely the more blatant offender. The bad writing also rubs off on the characters, who are either annoying, boring, or both. And the voice acting in these movies makes it really apparent that the actors were only in on it for the paycheck. This especially applies to Ronny Chieng in Inspector Sun, who's so unenthusiastic in his performance that he might as well have had a text-to-speech voice. Oh yeah, and another thing, these movies are really unfunny, but in different ways than you might expect, believe it or not. With Rally Road Racers, it's loaded with immature jokes and poorly timed physical comedy, which is bad enough, but it also has the added bonus of having blatant racial stereotypes. Yeah, because that's what the 6-year-olds watching this wanted to see, racism. With Inspector Sun, on the other hand, the main thing it has going for its humor is that it never shuts up. It assumes you must have the worst case of ADHD imaginable, because it is just constant talking and it never gives the movie any time to breathe. And the biggest contributor in that regard is Janie. You remember how I said Monkey King is one of my top 10 least favorite characters in all of fiction? Janie might actually be in my top 3. That's not an exaggeration. She never stops talking. Almost all of her scenes are of her constantly blabbering, with her voice being so grating that it makes Ezra Miller sound sophisticated. Look, I wish I could rank these movies lower. Even if they may have had like one good scene or one decent idea every now and then, they're easily the worst animated films to come out in 2023, and also some of the worst animated films I've ever seen, period. So what, pray tell, could possibly be worse?
Boy, hello?
Looks like I spoke too soon. I'm amazed Expendables was released in the state it was in. It is one of the most mind-bogglingly incompetent blockbusters I think I've ever seen. Everything about it is terrible. Let's start with the action and visual effects, because holy shit does this movie look like ass. Not only does the overall directing suck, but the action scenes are genuinely hard to watch. The editing is abysmal, with so many unnecessary quick cuts that it makes the Mulan remake look competently edited. The camera work is some of the worst I've ever seen in a major motion picture. It looks like it was shot by a gorilla with Parkinson's, with said gorilla also being blackout drunk. Seriously, there's so much shaky cam that I honestly thought I was gonna be nauseous. And the VFX work makes me wonder how this costed $100 million, while at the same time looking like it costed just $100. The green screen effects are so painfully obvious, and a good majority of them are for stunts that they could have filmed on an actual set. Like, it's embarrassing in all honesty. And not helping matters is that the CGI looks like it was rendered on a GameCube. Okay, so it looks terrible, but believe me, that's the least of Expendables' concerns, because the writing is also a train wreck. There's so many insanely stupid decisions made, especially involving Sylvester Stallone's character. For being the most iconic character in the Expendables franchise, it sure is odd that they killed him off in the first 20 minutes, only for it to be an insanely contrived fake-out later on. The rest of the characters aren't much better either, where despite sporting an A-list cast, all the actors sound bored out of their minds. Maybe Jason Statham was trying his best to salvage whatever he could, but the rest of the actors had zero chemistry or charisma. Like I said earlier, Expendables is a travesty of a film. It was really close to the number 1 spot, and I mean really close, but something else managed to be worse. But before we talk about it, let's go over some dishonorable mentions. At the start of this video, I said that I saw a lot of movies this year, 70 to be specific. Obviously, there were a lot of bad ones, but I don't think all of them were worthy of a spot on this list. So here's 10 movies that I still think are worth bringing up for how bad they turned out to be. They are, in alphabetical order, 65. This could have been really good, and Adam Driver is a great actor, but sadly what we got was a boring slog with hardly anything memorable about it. 80 for Brady. Are you in the mood to see some of Hollywood's most legendary actresses talking about football for an hour and a half? Well then this movie is for you. Or maybe not because it's super unfunny and unengaging. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom. As the final entry in the DC Extended Universe, I guess it could have been worse, but it doesn't do that good a job as the franchise's swan song with its disjointed script, varying VFX quality, and underwhelming villains. House Party. It's really boring, and the humor mostly consists of this movie probably having more uses of the N-word than Django Unchained. The last half hour or so was somewhat entertaining, however, so I decided to show it some mercy. Leo. It's generic, the animation looks like crap, and the voice acting sucks, but it does have a nice message of being willing to open up about your insecurities, and a few of the jokes were okay. The Little Mermaid. Oh great, another Disney remake, and another one that's mostly the same as before, but with the few changes made being completely stupid, the CGI on the sea creatures being uncannily realistic, and a new song that could constitute as a violation of the Geneva Convention. I did like the performances from Halle Bailey and Melissa McCarthy, but I wish they could have been in a better and less soulless movie. The Marvels. I guess it's not as bad as some of the other more recent content to come out of the MCU, and I do think the leading ladies' chemistry was on point. Sadly, the writing is a mess, the villain is a joke, the actual jokes fall flat, the CGI ranges from pretty nice to downright embarrassing, and the movie fails to get me excited for what Marvel has planned for the future outside of Deadpool 3. My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3. It's really boring. It's so boring, in fact, that I forgot about a good majority of it while writing this video. The only thing I remember about it was that one of the characters is non-binary, but that's just about it. Peter Pan and Wendy. Imagine taking the magic and excitement of the Disney classic and diluting it into a boring slog with stilted acting and an overly dreary and depressing presentation. Well, that's Peter Pan and Wendy for ya. Consider it number 11 if you would. And finally, Paw Patrol the Mighty Movie. Yep, I'm just as surprised as you are, at least when you take into account my history with the first Paw Patrol movie. But yeah, I'd actually say this was an improvement over its predecessor. It's got some decent animation, a surprisingly great soundtrack, and some exciting action scenes. Sadly, that doesn't make up for its otherwise generic and contrived writing, messy pacing, and the confusing decision to give prominent credits to actors who only got 1 or 2 lines max, which is why I included it as a dishonorable mention. Again, it's a step up from before, but not a very big one. And now, on to number 1. Disappointment in the game of life. Honestly, I don't think it should be too surprising that I'd say the worst movie to come out in 2023 is Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. The previous year, the character finally entered the public domain, and with that came the advent of people who thought, what if we took this innocent cartoon character and put him in a violent slasher movie? Personally, I don't mind the mere idea of taking a family-oriented property and making it into something more mature, but this is not how you do it. And making something cute, violent, and gory isn't even a new idea. You'd think Winnie the Pooh being in the public domain could help people tell more creative stories with him, but alas, we have him and Piglet slaughtering a group of teenage girls. And Blood and Honey itself is such a nothing burger. Don't worry though, the empty fries and holographic drink are there as well. Not only is the concept boring, but the movie is too. The pacing is agonizingly slow despite the runtime being under 80 minutes, there's a lot of filler, the ending is way too abrupt, and the tension is practically non-existent. Like, I don't know about you, but I thought horror movies are supposed to make you feel uneasy and disturbed. Speaking of which, the kills are really forgettable. A lot of the violence is rather odd, like how Pooh uses some hair as a whip in one scene, but the kills are boring and the blood effects look incredibly fake. Yeah, I get this was an indie project made on a low budget, but even for those standards, this movie looks like crap. This is especially apparent in the costumes for Pooh and Piglet, where it doesn't even look like they tried to make them look convincing. In addition, the lighting is so bad that sometimes it's hard for me to tell what's going on, which isn't helped by how much unnecessary shaky cam there is. Again, I get it's a horror film and all that, but you could have at least let me see what was happening without having to constantly adjust my screen's brightness. And you want to hear the worst part? Blood and Honey is so bad that it's not even memorably bad. At least with more objectively worse movies, I could say I felt something watching them. But this, I felt nothing but pure apathy. That's why this section isn't as long as it could have been, because this movie gave me next to nothing to work with. It is nothing. It's without a doubt the worst film of 2023, and it wasn't even a difficult choice.
Yeah.
Like I said in my 2022 ranking, I actually think there's some value to be found in watching bad movies like these. It helps us learn more about our own personal tastes and what we like or don't like, not to mention how it can help us to better appreciate the stuff we do like. And believe me, there were plenty of great movies that came out last year, and I'll be highlighting some of them in my best movies of 2023 videos when they come out, so be on the lookout for them and more new episodes of Isaac Reviews 2024 in the future. With that said, thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!